Good afternoon, everybody. I'm excited to present our first speaker for today, Eileen Boekestein. Eileen is the Environmental Education Manager for the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, where she's responsible for Michigan's statewide environmental education efforts through Eagle Classroom. She holds a master's degree in environmental studies with an emphasis on environmental communication from Green Mountain College and a bachelor's degree in environmental biology from Cornerstone University. Eileen has worked in environmental education for more than 18 years, with a focus on cross-boundary work connecting science and governmental organizations with educators and the public. Throughout her career, Eileen has worked in local nature centers, higher education, environmental nonprofits, and state government. In each of these roles, she has focused on cross-boundary work connecting science and governmental organizations with educators and the public, with the goal of building environmental literacy. Toward this end, Eileen works extensively with schools across Michigan to support educators and students in the implementation of place-based stewardship action projects to protect Michigan's environment. So please give Eileen a big round of applause.
Hang on, let me get myself situated up here. I'm going to use this guy because I'm a little bit of a wanderer. I want to make sure you can hear me. Sorry. All right. Are we good? Are we feeling good? Okay. Well, hello. Thank you. Thanks for that nice introduction. I always feel super awkward when people introduce me that way. As you heard, am Eileen Boekestein. I'm really honored to be here today. Happy to be talking with you about the idea of hope in K-12 education. And I just want to mention before I kick it off that I am talking today about K-12 education specifically, but my work in environmental education, many of you I know here in the room work in this space as well, and that's not just young people. Sometimes we put environmental education into this box of kids, but this is something that happens across the entire lifetime. I like to use the phrase from cradle to grave. So my job in fostering environmental literacy is not just in kids. A lot of what I'm going to talk about can actually be applied in a much broader sense as well. So happy to be here today. So I only theoretically have a total of 30 minutes. So I'm going to try to be quick, and I told Eileen I'd only talk for 20, so I'm gonna try. A lot of things to tell you. If you want to hear more from me, if you feel like you didn't get enough, I'm going to be speaking tomorrow for an hour at the Speaking Community College, 45 minutes. So you can come hear more of me there. But the theme of this summit is really rethinking the role of education in the climate crisis. And there's these 3 R's that we're really focusing in on. So we've got reflect. My thoughts today are going to kind of be structured under these themes. So we're going to reflect on why we need to transform the way we think about K-12 climate change education. We are going to work on repairing our understanding of what really makes good climate change education. At this point, this is changing rapidly, but there's a lot of research out there on what makes high quality climate change education. We're going to dive into that a little bit. And sometimes people don't like it when I get too into the weeds on research, but a lot of you are academics, so I hope that you will indulge me for a little bit today. And then finally, we're going to talk about how we can regenerate our planet through hope-fueled action. That's where kind of my own personal emotional experience is going to come in just a little bit. So like I said, come hang out with me more tomorrow if you want to go into more depth on this. So we're going to start with this idea of reflecting on why we need to update the way we think about climate change education. So for many of us, when someone says the word climate change, you might have some feelings that arise. And we're going to talk about why those feelings are important and how they need to be built into the way that we educate, because sometimes our own feelings or our students' feelings might be getting in the way of the way that we're educating. So as we kick off our reflection, I want you to take just a moment and think about, when I say the words climate change, or when you think about climate change, what is the first thing that comes to mind? This could be a word, it could be a color, it could be an image, it could be a phrase, it could be a policy. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Raise your hand if you want to tell me. Yes?
Water.
Water, I heard. What else?
Hot.
Hot, I heard hot. Brian?
Collapse.
Collapse. How about one more? Melting. Yeah, so hot, collapse, melting, water, what's the impact going to be? A lot of times, especially for those of us who work in the space of education around this, the first thing we think about is, oh, it's really bad. Like, oh, we might have some anxiety there. And I want us to reflect on what that does to a young person. So some of us as adults, we learned, we were like raised while the climate science was happening, while we were coming to understand the true depth of this problem. And so yes, it's bad, yes, it's stressful, yes, it's hard for us, but I want you to think about, our kids, our younger generation, they are being raised every day. They learn about this, it's at school, they hear about it, it's their day-to-day. And if you were raised up in a world where everything you heard was that your life was not going to be great, your future was wrecked, it might be really difficult for you. And I want to dive into a little bit of what that looks like in how we turn that dread, how we turn that disempowerment and that stress into something positive, and how we can use hope to do that. So you're probably not, unaware of this term, climate anxiety. This is something that is starting to be studied, and there's a lot more research around this than there used to be. If you are up on your climate change research, which many of you probably are, you know that the 6th IPCC report was really heartbreaking in its clear statement of how quickly and how rapidly the climate is changing, so much more so than scientists even thought it was. And how many, not just millions, but billions of people on Earth live in contexts that are particularly vulnerable to climate change impacts. Whether that's because they live in a place that is being impacted quite directly, whether it's flooding or extreme heat or something like that, or whether they are a population, whether they're poor, whether they are people of color, whether they are people with mental health issues living in, they're very, very vulnerable to climate change, and many people actually live at an intersection of those two places. We know that there's a lot weighing on us, and that 6th IPCC report, interestingly, was also the first one that linked mental health issues to this idea of climate change and brought up this idea of climate anxiety because of direct impacts like the trauma of dealing with a natural disaster emergency. There's really interesting health impacts. Sorry, my NPHHS friends are through stuff, if I'm getting anything wrong here. But interesting health impacts on like the way that extreme heat changes the way that our body metabolizes medications that we take. The way that heat affects the way that we interact with our family members, and the rates of domestic violence increasing when we have these extreme heat events. So there's a lot of different ways that the climate is affecting all of us and brings up this sense of anxiety. And this is where it's going to start to get kind of research papery, our young people are really feeling this. And so this is, it's kind of, my husband was like, that graph is kind of too busy to put on the screen. I was like, it'll be big, they'll be able to see it. The Lancet Planetary Health published a report or a study back in 2021, December of 2021, that looked at climate anxiety and feelings of, how the government is affected in that, of youth. So this is young children in 10 countries around the world. And it asks them so there's two things that are being displayed on this graph. It asks you, how worried are you about climate change? How worried are you? So that's the sort of bottom color, the red, orange, yellow, green lines on the graph. So you can see, if it's hard for you to read, the very top set of bars is all 10 countries that they surveyed. There was 10,000 kids, I think I mentioned, total in this study. And then the bottom set of lines is the USA, and then the others are in between there if you're interested. Australia, Brazil, Finland, France, India, Nigeria, Philippines, Portugal, and UK. So this to me was kind of distressing to me because not listed on here, 75% of the kids that they surveyed said that the future was uncertain and that it was frightening. 83% of these students, these young people, they weren't high school students, said that we have failed to take care of the planet. So overwhelmingly, our young people are freaked out about what's going to happen. They feel like we failed to take care of the planet. And then what you can see here, if you were to, I'll do the math for you, these red and sort of like orangey bars on the top for all countries, those are the extremely or very worried numbers. So we've got 59% of young people across all these countries are either very or extremely worried about climate change. If you add on the yellow bar there, which is moderately worried, we're up to 89%. So 84%. So at least 84% of youth across all these countries on average are moderately, very, or extremely worried about climate change. And then that top bar, this is the part that really broke my heart, is to what extent does your worry about climate change impact your daily functioning, your daily life and emotion? So in all these countries, 45% of these young people said that it impacted their daily life and functioning. And even in the US, if we're just looking at our own country here, 26% gave that answer. So a quarter of our young people here, their daily life is being affected by their concern over climate change. So that's pretty significant. There was a similar study also published in The Lancet that came out in 2024. This looked just at the United States and actually looked a little bit older. It looked at students ages, or young people ages 16 to 24, and thought about their level of worry. So the question at the top in small print, how worried, if at all, are you about climate change and its impacts on people on the planet? Again, a lot going on here. We've got all the states on the y-axis. But what is important, just look at this kind of big picture. The lightest colors, the light pink and the second lightest that are on the left, those are the not at all or a little worried. So basically everything, and I'll just show you, everything from here on is moderately, very, or extremely worried about climate change. So this is following through as these young people get older. It is not hard to tell where this anxiety is coming from, right? It is really simple. It's not easy, but it's simple when we're teaching about climate change to focus on the facts and the science, which are admittedly very sad and scary. So it's very easy to focus on that. It's very easy to put the majority of our emphasis on, combating misinformation, making sure that we're not getting it wrong going forward. And I don't want to diminish that. It's very, very important. We'll talk a little bit about that, to be honest about the truth of the situation. But it's really, really critical that we understand that an overemphasis on this doom perspective can be just as harmful as climate denialism. There are studies that have confirmed that this is the same level of impact as far as making people not acting. So doom, it demotivates people and it disempowers. It makes you feel like there's nothing you can do to change the difference here. And with something so big and so important and critical as climate change, we don't want people to be feeling like this little bug over here that is never gonna get it right, so we might as well give up. So how do we combat that? And that's where I'm gonna come in and talk a little bit about this idea of transformative hope. And that's where I get a little there's lots of different ways we can talk about hope. Transformative hope is my preferred term, and I'll explain a little bit why. But the bottom line is we've got to be honest about the situation. And being honest, if all we're doing is focusing on the doom, we're not being completely honest about the situation that we're in here. So we're going to talk a little bit about hope, the importance of it. This saying like everything's going to be fine while the world is on fire behind us, that is a type of hope. But that's a type of hope that's based on denial. It doesn't get you anywhere. It's not being honest about the situation. So we don't want that denial-based hope. We want a really active hope. And there's two kind of, as far as what I've read, I'm sure there's more, there's two sort of main chunks or fields of hope that kind of come up, especially when it comes to education. One of them is this idea of constructive hope. So this is a hope that's very solutions-focused, saying, yes, we have caused problems. We have, as humans, impacted the planet. We've gotten ourselves in this situation, and we know that we are creative and that we can come up with solutions, and that if we work together, we can make a difference. This is a very solution-active form of hope. newer term to me, which I actually started looking into more after Elena shared Becky's paper with me, is this idea of critical hope. And similarly, action-focused, but critical hope, think of the word criticism. We're taking this lens and looking at this from a systems perspective. We're saying, what caused this? What caused this problem? And yes, the root of this problem is the systems, the way we've set up the world, the way that we run our planet. These systems have caused the problem, and we're going to focus on how do we transform these systems in order to get to a solution. So it is much more like a big picture type of hope. And one of these is not better than the other, necessarily. They're just different ways of approaching hope. And what I have started to read more about, and I'm very interested in, is this idea of transformative hope, which is what I titled the presentation of. So transformative hope is basically combining those two. So it's saying we are going to focus on solutions, and we are going to focus on solutions that are part of a bigger system. We're not going to focus on just solving the one problem down the street from my house or the one thing in my community. We're going to figure out what's the big picture, how can my individual solutions fit in with these collective solutions. Transformative hope is based on this, if you're an education researcher person, on the idea of transformative learning theory. And transformative learning theory really emphasizes these deep, long-term shifts in your belief systems and your actions and systems, active systems out in the world as a whole. So what I'm calling for today is that when we're educating, and especially when we're educating young people, that we are doing it through the lens of this active, systems-focused hope, saying we can make a difference here. I always bring notes and then I don't look at them. Okay, so many of us here are educators in the room in one type or another, and if you don't think of yourself as an educator, I mean, you probably educate somebody sometime when you're talking to them. So we all talk about things, and if we are all talking about climate change the way we should be, then we are all educators of one type or another. So we understand the importance of addressing the truth and of getting at the knowledge here, and as I mentioned, sometimes the way we educate can get in the way of the outcome we want, which is young people knowing what they need to do and being empowered to do it. So I'm going to take just a brief moment to talk about what that repair looks like. What does good climate change education looks like? And if this is a piece that you're like, I wish I had more information on this, come to me speaking tomorrow, and I will give you a lot more. But good climate change education, there's tons and tons of research on this. There's a review that is coming out very soon through the North American Association for Environmental Education from researcher Martha Monroe. She shared her advanced copy with me, so you're getting hot off the presses info from her. But she did a review basically of all the recent climate change education literature that's out there and found that there are three major domains that we need to pay attention to with climate change education. And I'm going to sneak peek, like you're not going to be shocked if you do like place-based education, for example, or stewardship education now. A lot of these things are tracking with what we know about effective environmental education as a whole. So these three domains are one that covers the cognitive domain. This is the piece that we most often think about with climate change education, the facts, the science, the systems, things like that. There is also the action-oriented domain. So that is, we're not just teaching about the content, we're also empowering young people with the actual skills that they need to make the difference here. And then we have the socio-emotional domain. So the socio-emotional domain is the piece that I think most frequently gets left out of climate change education. Part of it is that systems thinking, but part of it is what's happening here, what's happening in my own mind and my own body as I'm thinking about climate change, and how do I process that, and how do I turn that into hope. So these three domains are like the big sort of picture overall of where our climate change education needs to be under, and then these domains can be expressed through these major characteristics that Martha Monroe identified out of all the climate change education literature. So first of all, and we'll go into way more depth on these tomorrow, our climate change education needs to be personally relevant and meaningful. Great example with our opening remarks here. Making this relevant to your own lives, to your own community. You need to have some kind of personal connection to that. That is, that storytelling piece is so important. That understanding the connection in your community is so important. It needs to engage learners. The personally relevant and meaningful is a great way to engage learners, but it needs to be engaging in some way. So you got to know your audience as you're speaking with them. Good climate change education enables learners to experience the scientific process. This, I feel like, it is a given, but I also think it's another place that we sort of underestimate in climate change education, because when you think about all the misinformation and disinformation about climate change that you hear, how much of it is because somebody just doesn't really get how science works, like you don't really get the process. The fact that we changed our minds when we got new information doesn't mean that we're flip-floppers, it means that we're doing science. So enabling learners to experience that process through actively doing science themselves is a critical part of climate change education and something that K-12 educators need to teach anyway. And so why not use climate change as an opportunity? Critically, huge part using our personal school and community projects to build skills that ties back to that personal relevance and meaning. We need to not just tell kids what to do and then expect them to know what to do. We need to give them opportunities and really scaffold that skill set for them of building that muscle, of connecting with community members, of learning to identify a need that's out there, of putting what they know to work. And sometimes they're going to come up with weird ideas and they might not work, but they need to practice that. And we as educators, part of our job is to help them build that skill, that muscle, so that when they get to college and university, or they get out into the real world of work, that they know how to put what they know into action. And I've seen that so many times. Kids are very book smart, but they don't know how to do anything with it. And so this is a very, I know I see lots of place-based ed people in here, very, very well-known set of ideas in the realm of place-based education that applies very specifically to climate change education right now. But there's discussion, which is sort of like, I'm going to tell you my side, you're going to tell me your side. There is debate, which is we're going to see who wins the argument. And then there's deliberative discussion, which is we are going to have a conversation based on a shared goal of where we want to get to. And so if we can agree that we want to have a healthy planet, we want to have, we all want to be safe, we can start with those kinds of things and move forward. And that's one of the ways we can pull some of the anger or the angst out of climate change education. It's not easy to do. It is a difficult skill, but there's some really cool resources out there that I will talk about, guess when? Tomorrow. And then finally, I know I'm running short on time, so the final thing we're going to talk about today is really what drives this change. So we've talked about why we got to change it. We've talked about what it looks like to change it, but what drives this change? And this part comes back to that socio-emotional domain, that what's going on in your own head and heart as an educator, what's going on in the head and the hearts of your students. And some of you have heard me give presentations in the past, and you'll be like, yeah, this is where Eileen kind of gets all into literature and poetry. But I want to focus on this idea that this ultimately comes down to love. This is a picture from a t-shirt that I've had for years and years and years. And I was going to wear the t-shirt, but I love the t-shirt so much that it is a little bit too gross to wear on a stage. So I scanned it instead so you can see that it was a little wordy. But when you think about it, when it comes to motivation based on fear or doom, even then, what's the ultimate root of that? The ultimate root of that really still is love. And so this quote, John Burroughs was a naturalist in the 1600s, and he penned this phrase about knowledge and love. Knowledge without love will not stick, but if love comes first, knowledge is sure to follow. And think about this when it comes to your hobbies. Maybe you really like bird watching. You're definitely going to learn about birds. Maybe you're super into Taylor Swift and you know all of the lore. If you love something, you're going to know the stuff about it. You're going to be motivated to learn about that. And so part of our work as educators is to help nurture that love in our young people. And it can be so the doom and the fear that we forget why we're educating in the first place. And so if we really want to foster this transformative hope, we really need to focus on how do we build that love? How do we build that connection that is going to drive not only our own desire to teach, but also our young people's desire to learn? So David Sobel is a well-known writer in the field of place-based, project-based education, and he's very clear. It's one of my favorite quotes from him, and is well-known. Let the young kids, let them wallow in and love the world before we ask them to save it. And we're plugged for tomorrow, maybe this is the last one. I'm going to talk a lot more about that tomorrow, of like how we build that up over time, because it's important, especially with this K-12 age, to be thinking about where they're at developmentally, in terms of what you present to them, how you ask them to think about the world. You know, kids who are 5, 6, 7, their brains can't handle like the super big abstract global stuff quite the way that a middle or high schooler student can. And so we've got to start them off on this strong foundation of love and of care and of connection. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that next time. The other thing I want to mention is that sometimes we ask, when we do this action-focused thing, we're asking students to strive for something or come up with solutions for something that they've never seen before. So we want you to, how are you going to fix this problem? How are you going to get this city to zero emissions? How are you going to clean up this river? And these kids, they don't know sometimes what clean is, or they don't know what a functioning ecosystem is. And there's a whole body of research on this thing called shifting baseline syndrome. So the young people, as the earth and as ecosystems degrade, young people, their baseline of what is healthy and good, it declines. It's different than what our baseline might have been growing up, because the world has changed. And so part of our job is to help them become exposed firsthand to what those positive solutions look like and to what those healthy ecosystems look like. So that could be time out in nature. Obviously, it's a big one. But it could also be helping them to get connected to seeing the solutions that are in action in their own community, seeing problems that have been solved, hearing from people who have made that difference before we ask them to go out and do the same, because it's very, very difficult to do something that you've never seen before. I love to incorporate creative writing and poetry into my discussions about climate change, and I actually have a whole other presentation that I do that is extensively about the integration of handling your climate change emotions through poetry. And if anybody would like to ask me to do that one later, I'd love to give that presentation. It's like 2 hours though, so hang on, hang tight. But I want to end with sharing something that was sent to me actually by a friend of mine who I used to work with in Indiana. She follows this poet, this writer, her name is Carrie Newcomer, on Substack. And she got this, sent to her, and she said, "Eileen, this made me think of you." And it was really one of like the most meaningful things that I had gotten in a while, because I was like, oh, I'm so glad that somebody thought of me when they read this poem. And my hope is that each of you as educators would start to be able to incorporate this transformative hope, this hope that's based on love and connection to the place that you're in such a way that maybe someday someone will send you a poem like this and say that it reminds you of them. So I'm going to read aloud to you, and then I don't know if I have the questions or not, but maybe I do. The poem is called What Do I Love? Start from there. Perhaps the place to start is not to ask, what can I do? But first ask, what do I love? Begin from there, where the heart expands, where you know for sure what actually matters. Because it is love, always love, that keeps pointing us in the right general direction, illuminating the path, even if it cannot always clear the way. Some of you are probably familiar with the book of essays called All We Can Save. There's a very wonderful educator toolkit attached to that, and one of the toolkits that one of the tools that this reminded me of is this Venn diagram of what is it that you love, what is it that you're good at, and what does your community need, and where those three things intersect, that's your role in the climate crisis. And so I hope that you can take away from this inspiration to kind of dig a little deeper into what it is that motivates you, into how you can incorporate a little bit more of this idea of transformative hope into your teaching, whether that's with college students, K-12 students, your family members, and know that if you need help with that, you're always welcome to reach out to me and ask me for assistance. I don't know if I can help. I'll try. I'll do my best to try. So here's my contact info. Please feel free to reach out anytime. And I don't know, Lena, do I have time for questions? Thank you. It looks like I do have time for questions if anybody has any.
We have microphones here, and if you want, you can just come here. And if I can disconnect it, I can bring them to you.
I promise not to answer with clumsy questions. Brian, what question,
Eileen? Brian Dale with the English department here. Eileen, you've come out to Grand Valley State's Allendale campus, it's now referred to as the Valley campus, to meet with a first-year learning community that I teach with my colleague and friend in the classics department, Charles Gans, called The Romans and Us, an introduction to the interdisciplinary environmental humanities. And one of the primary objectives of that course is to build a sense of community, right? While also using literary text, film, art more generally, to engage with some pressing and difficult, hard truths about the climate crisis. And so you came out with Matt Bain, who was for the Lower Grander Organization of Watersheds, and you took us on a tour, a partial tour of the campus, and pointed out the green infrastructure that was there, right? And also we did some collective thinking about what's not there and should be there. And so since you came out a couple of years ago, we've been interested in the cultural practice of rewilding. Done some work with the Lower Grand River Organization of Watersheds. And so it occurs to me that the practice of getting outdoors, right? But also engaging in the process of actually planting life, right? Is something that can tap into our capacities to counterbalance some of the despair and anxiety and the terror that folks feel. And so I wonder if you could speak to whether there are efforts to engage in that type of outdoor place-based education in K-12 spaces, and whether you know examples of that happening in college and university campuses in the state of Michigan.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great point, and it is, Michigan is particularly blessed with abundance of that type of work happening across the state, including by some folks who are here in the room. So Michigan has a couple of cool initiatives that are promoting this kind of work. One of them is called the Great Lakes Stewardship Initiative, which exists purely to promote this place-based stewardship education. So education that is grounded in place, that uses your local community as the context for learning, and that incorporates this action and community connection component. And so there are 7 hubs? 6 hubs around the state of the Great Lakes Stewardship Initiative, one of which is housed here at Grand Valley State University in the College of Education and Community Innovation. Did I get that right? Yes. So Clay and Vicki and Mara and Allison over here are part of that initiative that works closely with K-12 teachers. They provide professional development, they provide grant funds, they provide connections to community partners to really put this into action on K-12 campuses here in the West Michigan area, and then in areas across other parts of the state as well. There are other hubs of that. The other initiative that I just want to highlight, which is sort of connected to GLSI, is the Michigan Children and Nature Coalition. So this is sort of a loose coalition of organizations across the state that work in this space of getting kids outside, especially building that nature connection. And so some of them are colleges and universities or nonprofits, and some of them are nature centers, working with people to help build the ability for kids to get outside, whether that is building that through policy change or outreach and education. There's lots of resources out there to make that happen. And I will just add, again, that idea of like, most commonly what I see kids do is planting things. That's probably the most common project that we see them do. And I think there is something special about that like, that feeling of life and the connection of your hands in the soil. And it's powerful. So yes, I'm pleased to say there's lots of support out there for the K-12 space. Again, that's something that not to beat a dead horse, but that is something that I will spend a lot more time on tomorrow, what that looks like. And I think these are all recorded if you aren't coming tomorrow. Or you can just talk to me.
Let's give one more round of applause to Eileen, and I hope that everybody comes.
Thank you.